Let's be very clear about this. When Vice President Biden was in the United States Senate working with segregationists to oppose busing, which was the vehicle by which we would integrate America's public schools, had I been in the United States Senate at that time, I would have been completely on the other side of the aisle. And let's be clear about this. Had those segregationists their way, I would not be a member of the United States Senate, Cory Booker would not be a member of the United States Senate, and Barack Obama would not have been in a position to nominate him to the title he now holds. The Vice President has still failed to acknowledge that it was wrong to take the position that he took at that time.
When Senator Harris was the Attorney General for 8 years in the state of California, there were two of the most segregated school districts in the country, in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. And she did not, I didn't see a single solitary time she brought a case against them to desegregate them.
This is the fourth debate that we have had, and the second time that we have been debating what people did 50 years ago with busing, when our schools are as segregated today as they were 50 years ago. We need a conversation about what's happening now.
That is Democratic Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, reminding everyone last night that this is not an election from the 1970s. And Senator Bennet joins us now. Senator Bennet, good to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us. We'll get to that in just a moment. I want to talk about health care, though, because you sort of took up the cause for the anti-Medicare for all argument, which we heard on the first night and again first from Joe Biden last night and then from you. You said Medicare for all is a terrible policy. Why do you believe that?
I believe that because I don't see any point in taking away Americans' choice to have employer-based health insurance and to force them to pay $33 trillion in taxes for that privilege. You know, that is roughly 70% of what we collect over the next 10 years in revenue without Bernie's plan. And so, you know, it's virtually a doubling of the amount of revenue the federal government's collecting. The Democratic base is not for that. I think what we should be for is a public option that finishes the job with the Affordable Care Act and gives families the ability to make a choice for themselves.
Were you surprised, Senator?
I understand.
Were you surprised, Senator, more broadly last night, as we've been discussing this morning and many Democrats were saying last night, at the general attacks on the legacy of President Obama, a man who has a 97% approval rating among Democrats in this country, on immigration, but also on the Affordable Care Act?
Yeah, you know, I think that the Affordable Care Act was his signature accomplishment. I was there for that work. I know how hard it was to get that done and how hard it was to defend that against McConnell's effort to repeal it. And now Democrats are talking about repealing it instead of building on it. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And there was some discussion last night about the work that was done on the Gang of Eight. I was one of those people that wrote the immigration bill in 2013. President Obama supported that work, and I think we'd be a lot better off today had we been able to get that bill through the House. Never could because of the ridiculous Hastert rule. So I do think we got to get focused on the future. We got to get focused on Donald Trump. But we need to make sure that our nominee is somebody that can win states like Colorado and like Arizona, like Iowa, like Maine, so that we can win the presidency and the Senate majority as well.
You know, Senator Bennet, Joe Scarborough here. Yeah, go ahead.
I heard you're in Maine.
No. I'm on Main Street, Washington, D.C. Yeah. So anyway, I'm glad you brought up what you did about busing and having debates about what happened in 72, 73, 74, because when it comes to the issue of race, we have an arsonist running through the House right now, this week, setting every room on fire, attacking black congressmen, attacking majority black cities, attacking women of color who are in Congress. I mean, there is so much to talk about now. This is beyond what George Wallace would do publicly, and yet people are still trying to fight about what happened.
Right.
When ABBA was like releasing Dancing Queen and Richard Nixon was in the White House. This is insanity. What's going on here?
Joe, you're making an incredible point, I think. Donald Trump, for a guy that's apparently never read a book in his life, has perfected this reactionary, racist, arsonist playbook for running this country. And it's why I said last night, his racism is enough for every single American to vote him out of office. It should be disqualifying. And we, all of us, not just Democrats, but independents and Republicans as well, have got to come together and figure out a way to close over this guy and close over this racism. I was in a shoe shine shop yesterday in Detroit, and we were having a conversation with the guys that work there about how a guy like Trump could possibly be elected. And one of the guys in the shop said, it's always been this way. And that is such a depressing view of where we are. We have made some progress in this country. And for Trump to be dragging us backward into this cesspool of racism and division, this is something we all have to stand up against. And these issues are real. I mean, as you know, I was a school superintendent, but in my district, I've seen progress. We've doubled the number of kids of color that are graduating and going to college. We've cut the dropout rate by 75%. We've increased the academic growth rates of kids in our district so much that a study from Stanford came out last week saying that the Denver kids it's as if they have 60 additional days of school a year compared to the kids in the rest of the state. So I'm not saying everything there is perfect. We still have huge achievement gaps, but at least we've made progress. And as a country, man, we have got to continue to make progress here, and we got to get Trump out.
Let me ask one other question. While we're talking about the debate last night, and we're terribly confused by many attacks that a lot of the candidates had on Barack Obama. Barack Obama also got attacked pretty harshly about his immigration policies, which, of course, were nothing like Donald Trump's immigration policies. But you know this coming from a swing state. One thing Democrats could say after Barack Obama left office was that he brought illegal border crossings to the lowest point in half a century. And he did it in a humane way. Despite all that, Donald Trump still attacked Democrats for being for open borders. Shouldn't Barack Obama's policy on immigration be something that Democrats embrace as they try to win states like Colorado, Nevada, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Michigan?
Well, I certainly think his legacy supporting the Gang of Eight bill in 2013, which I wrote with John McCain and 6 other senators. I mean, that bill had a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people in this country. It had the most progressive DREAM Act that had ever passed. The agricultural provisions, which I worked on with Marco Rubio and others, were the first agricultural provisions of an immigration bill that were endorsed by the growers and by the Farm Workers Union. And it had $46 billion of border security in it. We doubled the number of border security agents. We built 350 miles of fence. We were able to see every single inch of the border using 21st century technology developed in Iraq and Afghanistan, not the president's ineffective and medieval wall. And we had internal security. You know, Joe, today as we stand here, we still don't know, because 40% of the people that are here that are undocumented came here and overstayed their visas. We still don't know who they are. That bill fixed that as well. And it was very clear that to get to a place where we were pulling people out of the shadows, giving them a pathway to citizenship, doing the right thing by the dreamers, that the American people and people in swing states like mine would think it was important for us to make sure that we had secured the border so that we don't repeat the issues that have happened over the last decades or so. That is the sweet spot, I think, for where a deal is going to be in the future.
Senator Bennet, given the numbers of candidates on the stage last night and the night before, it's not very often that an issue critical to American families gets enough time to be explained in detail about what you specifically, candidates, want to do about this issue. One of those issues is the American public education system. And you referenced it obliquely a couple of times last night, and given your background, one of the things you put out there was truly shocking and unknown, I think, to a lot of Americans. and it has to do with education and the incarceration rate in this country. 88% of inmates in American prisons have no high school diploma, correct?
Yes.
And
Yep.
so talk
yeah.
about that and the mix of race and class and the combustibility of that in the American public education system.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned last night that, you know, when you've got a system of education and one group of kids through no fault of their own has no access to preschool, and, you know, my kids begin to drop out of high school or drop out of college in elementary school. And it's one of the reasons why I thought it was so puzzling that Bernie and others have focused on this idea of extinguishing student debt. One of the candidates the other night said, I can't imagine anything that would stimulate our economy more than extinguishing the student debt. I can think of some things that would be more stimulating. I'm standing in the city of Detroit where there used to be hundreds of thousands of school kids. There are now 50,000 kids because of this legacy of segregation, this legacy of housing, discriminatory housing policy, this legacy of discriminatory court rulings that maroon the children in Detroit as they have been in cities all over America. And we need to figure out in this country how to give everybody universal preschool. We need to figure out how to shore up our K-12 system so that they're not as inequitable as they are, and so that we don't continue to repeat generation after generation after generation the kind of outcomes that we've had for kids of color and kids living in poverty. This should be a focus of the Democratic candidates, not something that comes up in the fourth debate because someone asks a sort of tangential question.
All right, Senator Michael Bennet from Colorado, thank you so much for being with us, and come visit us in Maine later this summer. We absolutely love Maine. Adrienne Elrod, so let's talk about Michael Bennet. A lot of people think he had a breakout performance last night, but the big question is, will it matter at this point?
That's exactly right, Joe. He had a great performance last night. I thought he had some really outstanding sound bites and moments on that debate stage. But we've got to keep in mind for the next debate, candidates have to qualify in two ways. They have to either achieve 2% in 4 national polls and or early state polls, and they have to raise 130,000 donations from unique donors, which means 130,000 people across the country have to give them a donation. It could be $1, it could be $5, it could be $2,700. But the qualifications for the third debate have significantly increased. So can Michael Bennet achieve that? I don't know. But, you know, I think there's a lot of people out there in America who want to see a few more moderates, you know, go forward on this debate stage. Amy Klobuchar has already announced that she's made the third debate. But I'd like to see Michael Bennet move forward because I think he's made some really important points. And I think Joe Biden probably appreciated having him on the debate stage last night, given the fact that he helped support Obamacare and made some really rational points on health care.
All right, Adrienne Elrod, thank you very, very much. And still ahead, we're going to talk to 2 other candidates who were on the debate stage last night, Senators Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. And later, Senator Bernie Sanders will be our guest. Morning Joe is coming right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.